Right, let's expand on this conversation. We're now joined by Professor Nirmala Gopal, who's in the discipline of Criminology and Forensic Studies at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Very good evening to you, Professor Gopal. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, it's been clearly set out, a lack of communication and a poor working relationship between communities and the police is affecting policing in many areas of KwaZulu-Natal. What would you say are some of the most pressing contributing factors?
Good evening, Paul, and good evening to your listeners. It's really a pleasure to be part of this discussion. So I think before I even begin to answer your question, we must perhaps take a step back and ask ourselves about the role of the community policing forums. So we do understand that the community policing forum is a legal community structure, and this has been established in terms of the South African Police Services Act. And the main mandate of the CPF is to facilitate good relationships between the police and communities. Now, if amongst its mandates, or one of the key roles of the Community Policing Forum is to promote communication between the community and the police. The question then that we need to ask is, are these policing forums effective? If it's a mandate of the South African Police Act to have a partnership between the police and the community, has it failed? Is it failing? And if it is or has failed, what are some of the interventions that the South African Police Service is actually implementing to resuscitate the community relationships and communications between the police and the community? I think those are very critical questions that we must ask ourselves before we even go to finding out the nature of this breakdown in their communication.
Yeah, perhaps let's, as you speak about the role of CPFs, what factors need to be understood for these units to become effective? Because without a clear focus on some of the root causes of crime, they generally have no effect.
I think, Paul, to a large extent, I think we do already understand the root causes of crime. And I think within communities itself, community members are aware of the nature of crimes that they are experiencing, as well as the extent of the crimes that they are experiencing. So in most instances, we understand the root causes. And usually, one of the main root causes of crime is the fact that we have a large unemployment population in our country. And I'm not saying that everyone who's unemployed will engage in crime, but I think it's one of the motivating factors. So that's the first instance. The second one is that the Act, the South African Police Act, is very categorical in terms of what the role of the CPF is. I think what is not happening is that our CPFs have largely become ineffective.
Yeah.
And perhaps we need to understand, why have our CPFs become ineffective? And research has shown us, though, that one of the reasons is that there's a lack of capacity, either in terms of numbers, or even a lack of capacity in terms of understanding what the mandate of the CPF is. Mm-hmm. We sometimes have people being elected onto CPFs for reasons aside from promoting good community relations and assisting in terms of understanding, identifying, and combating crime.
When it comes to some of the big concerns that have led to these robust discussions, Inchanga residents were saying that they've had to walk long distances to get to a police station because the mobile police station doesn't have the resources needed to assist them. That in itself is quite discouraging. How do police fight crime if they lack the equipment and resources to do so? Because in essence, they're also putting their own lives at risk. Too many police officers are risking their lives to do the job because of that.
So I think that's a non-negotiable. In terms of resources, given the fact that we have such high crime levels in South Africa, we absolutely need government to come on board and give and provide the resources that are reasonable enough to help to fight crime. And also, I think in terms of, especially rural areas, etc., where people have to walk long distances, it is in itself unsafe. So having better resource, whether they satellite or they proper police stations, we absolutely need better resources in those areas.
What about the trust deficit, the community and the police? It's clear that the South African public has low and declining trust and confidence in the police. How can police regain this public confidence?
I think that's a very interesting question, very complex, and I think that's going to be a really long haul, Mpo. This trust between community and police has broken down, over many decades already, and we have some very good theoretical understanding on, for example, whether the South African community has even given the mandate to be policed in the first instance. So there's quite a huge and complex academic discourse and debate around it. But I think in terms of regaining the trust, it's a long haul. There has to be attempts between police and communities, either via the community policing forums or other means, awareness campaigns, etc., where police start to form better relations with communities. But I think one of the main indicators of rebuilding trust is by showing crime levels going down. But in having said so, crime levels genuinely going down, not manufacturing crime levels that are going down. So I think that would be one of the greatest indicators and factors that will probably contribute towards regaining and rebuilding the trust between communities and police.
You spoke just now about, a deeper understanding of the role of the CPFs, that perhaps some don't even understand the mandate. How do police now and officials work with the CPF to perhaps clarify some of those breakdowns? A lack of understanding, of course, deems it ineffective.
I think it will depend on the particular CPF. I'm not saying that every CPF is ineffective and or dysfunctional.
Yeah.
I think what is important is to diagnose what are the problems or the challenges for a particular CPF. And depending on its challenges, then I think the CPF, well, of course, the police as well as the community will have to come together, have conversations, have dialogues, and find out what are the best methods for that particular CPF to reach and attain the mandate for which they are constituted. So I think it will have to be on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, very well. Thank you so much for weighing in on this discussion, Professor Nirmala Gopal, who is of the discipline of Criminology and Forensic Studies at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, helping us make sense, of course, of some of the details coming out of Injanga insofar as residents are concerned when it comes to policing and looking for effective solutions to curbing crime.